everybody, this is Mrs. Martin, and today I'm sharing with you a short story by author Adam Gidwitz. Adam Gidwitz is the author of several popular series of books. However, today's selection is a nonfiction autobiographical piece by him called The Coolness Equation. We are reading this in part because Adam Gidwitz will be here to visit us on Friday, February 2nd, during period 3 at Suffern Middle School. So make sure that you are ready with your questions and your ideas because the author will be in our presence very soon. So for now, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy The Coolness Equation. My whole life, I've wanted other kids to like me. Obviously, we all want friends, right? But when I say I wanted other kids to like me, I don't mean that I wanted friends. I mean that there were certain kids whose friendship I craved. Like the way you look at a sheet of brownies with peanut butter chips and you're like, oh my gosh, I want that so much, I'm going to steal the whole pan and hide in my room and shove all the brownies into my face. Do you ever feel this way? Or do I just have a weird brownie obsession? Anyway, there were certain kids who I wanted as my friends so badly. It started early. I remember feeling this way in the first grade. There was a girl named Jenny who was, through preschool and kindergarten, my best friend. And then Megan showed up. Megan. My blood boils just thinking about her. Suddenly, Megan and Jenny were hanging out all of the time, and I felt super left out and unreasonably angry. I can still feel those emotions in my chest right now. I remember one day it got so bad that I swiped a box of thumbtacks from the teacher's desk. And as Megan and Jenny sat beside each other on the rug listening to the lesson, I took the thumbtacks one by one and I threw them at Megan. None of them hit her because I was in first grade and thumbtacks are terrible projectiles. But I wanted them to hit her a lot. This feeling is jealousy, and we all feel it sometimes. But the feeling transformed as I got older. When I was in the third grade, there was a boy in my class named Evan. I thought Evan was cool. Cool became an important word in my life, probably starting right then. Evan didn't have the most friends. He wasn't the best at sports, but he was the funniest kid in our class. He also gave off the impression that he didn't really need any of us. Maybe because he had 2 older sisters who he could hang out with at home. So he was funny and independent of us. And he didn't really seem to care what we thought. Without ever realizing it, I came to associate this combination with the word cool. I think it became for me an unconscious definition. Funny plus independent plus impervious equals cool. So if we look at the bottom of the page, impervious is an adjective meaning unable to be affected by something, immune to or unbothered by something. So when the author puts this in his equation, he's saying that kids who are funny, who are independent, and who are not bothered by the judgments of others are cool. Starting in third grade, I coveted friendship with cool kids like Evan. Like a tray of warm brownies with melty peanut butter chips inside, I wanted. The second word that's highlighted is coveted. It means to want something badly, to crave or desire something powerfully. And in third grade, I actually managed to be friends with Evan. We created a little comedy routine together. We called it the Bouncing Baby Blues Brothers. We would sit next to each other and bounce against each other and sing. We're the Bouncing Baby Blues Brothers. All we want is our mother's wah wah. over and over. And the other kids thought it was hilarious. Oh, how I loved it. But I wasn't cool like Evan, even though I was a bouncing baby blues brother. I knew it, and everyone knew it. I might have been funny sometimes, but I wasn't independent because I so clearly wanted to be friends with Evan. And I certainly wasn't impervious because if ever anyone insulted me, I'd feel really upset. You know, like everyone else. Everyone else, that is, except the cool kids. According to my math, they never did. Over the next few years, the cool boys in my grade started identifying each other and hanging out together. There were 4 of them. Disclaimer: if you ask someone else in my grade who the cool kids were, they may well have named totally different kids as cool. These 4 weren't good at sports, so they weren't the jocks, and they didn't have the largest friend group, so they weren't the most popular. But in my mind, they were the coolest. They had the funny plus independent plus impervious equals cool, down cold. And there is some objective truth to their coolness, I think. It wasn't all in my head, because after high school, 2 of them started a rock band and became kind of famous. And they were on a couple of TV shows playing rock music, which, by many definitions, is cool. Well, you can imagine how I felt about this group of cool kids. I desperately, so badly, painfully, achingly wanted to be their friend. And you might be thinking, why? What's so great about being cool? I have no clue. But I did know that they were truly funny. When I sat at the lunch table with them, they could make me laugh so hard milk came out of my nose. So they might have been truly cool, but they definitely weren't truly kind. A group of us boys would try to hang out with these 4 cool kids, and they would regularly call us followers. "Don't be such a follower," they would say. And whoever they said it to would feel shame, while the rest of the followers would laugh and feel secretly relieved that it wasn't their day to be shamed. Or the cool boys would ditch a follower. They'd propose a game of hide-and-seek tag, like hide-and-seek but faster and more dangerous, in the hallways during lunch or after school. When we all were hiding, the cool kids would secretly organize everyone to ditch one of the followers, so he'd keep hiding and have no idea that everyone else was gone. I remember one day I was successfully hanging out with the cool kids and feeling really good about it when one of them said to me, "Hey, you remember that time with that guy? Wasn't that so funny?" And I, desperately wanting to be part of this cool group, eagerly said, "Yeah." And the cool kid said, "That guy with the thing?" "Yes," I said, laughing along. "Oh my gosh, that was hilarious." Then the cool kid suddenly stopped laughing and said, "What are you talking about?" And I felt like an idiot because clearly there was no guy with a thing. All the boys laughed at how eagerly I'd gone along with whatever the cool kids had said. What a follower I was. Being a follower was the opposite of being independent, and I certainly wasn't impervious to what the other kids said about me. When they teased me, it hurt, and everyone could see it. I might have still been funny on occasion, but even that was ebbing away. It's hard to be funny when you're constantly worried about saying the right thing or the wrong thing. Trying really hard to be funny is a bad way to be funny. So I was spending more and more time around the cool kids, and I was getting further and further away from being cool. One thing that the cool kids had in common was they liked to skateboard. They weren't amazing at it or anything, but they all did it, and they wore skateboarding shirts and shoes and wallets with chains on them. Wallets with chains were apparently a skater thing. I will never forget one trip to the mall in 7th grade with my mom. We were looking for clothes for me to wear. We saw a brand of skater t-shirts that the cool kids often wore. Since I thought the kids were cool, I thought the shirts were too. Since we were looking for clothes for me anyway, my mom agreed to buy me one. I wore this shirt to school a few days later. In science class, all the kids had gotten together before the teacher was there. One of the cool kids, his name was Chris, looked at me and said, "Why are you wearing that shirt?" I said, "I don't know. I like it." "That's a skater's shirt. You're not a skater." I didn't know what to say. I knew I wasn't a skater. In fact, I didn't know what I was. Chris did. He said, "Poser." This was a word I hadn't heard before. I figured out pretty quickly that it meant someone who pretends that they are something they are not. I also figured out pretty quickly that it was the opposite of being cool. So if we look at the bottom of the page, poser is defined as a person who acts in a specific way in order to impress other people. Somehow, through some magic I still do not understand, Chris got the entire class to point at me and chant, "Poser, poser, poser," over and over and over again. It must have ended somehow, sometime, because I am not still surrounded by chanting seventh graders. I imagine the teacher probably came in eventually. However, I don't remember it ending. In my head, it never did. I continued to subject myself to the cool kids' teasing, to their invitations to hang out and then be ditched. I wanted to be their friend so badly, more than I wanted to eat those brownies, a lot more. Until 8th grade. By then, I'd given up. It was too painful. My adolescent heart just couldn't take it anymore. I started hanging out with some other kids, and this was maybe worse than the cool kids, because these kids were into bad stuff, and I got into it as well. Then we all got caught, and I stopped hanging out with them too. Just before 9th grade, I made a decision. I decided that I couldn't be trusted to make friends. Either I was going to subject myself to cruel, torturous teasing, or I would get myself arrested. So I decided that starting in 9th grade, I would have no friends. And so I didn't. Sometimes I sat by myself at lunch. Other times I sat with whoever was around. From time to time, I even found myself at the table with Chris and the other cool kids, but I didn't care about them anymore. If they made me laugh, fine. However, when we all stood up to take our trays to the trash cans, I made sure to leave the cafeteria alone. If ever they or anyone else asked me if I wanted to hang out after school or come over to their house, I would always half smile and say, "No thanks." That might sound sad to you. It did, in fact, feel a little melancholy. That year, something really strange started to happen. I realized for the first time in my life that I kind of liked school and was good at it. History class was all about interesting stories from history. Who knew? English class was just a teacher giving you a good book and telling you to read it and enjoy it and explain why you enjoyed it. Sure. In science, we looked at freaky little monsters under a microscope. That's awesome, actually. I started to discover what I actually liked. Not what I thought would make the cool kids like me. What I liked. So I did those things. I often did them well. I felt proud of myself for the first time in my life. I was independent. So the highlighted word on this page is melancholy, which is a feeling of sadness, gloom, depression, or misery. Also, I didn't care if the cool kids said something mean about me anymore. And since I didn't care, and also I wasn't trying to hang around with them, they pretty much stopped saying mean things about me. Or, if they said them, I wasn't around to hear them. It created a virtuous cycle, all because I didn't care what they said. I had become impervious too. One day after school, near the end of the year, some boys from my grade were hanging out. I'd never really tried to get to know these guys. They weren't cool and they weren't popular. We started chatting, and it turned out that they liked a lot of the same things that I did. We geeked out over cool stories from history class, in fact. We started to hang out in the hallways after school more often. Then I was invited over to one of their houses, and I went. We stayed up all night playing a nerdy World War II simulation board game. It was one of the best nights of my life. Oh, and we made each other laugh. A lot. They were funny. I was funny. And also independent. And impervious. So was I, according to my own equation, cool? Maybe. I don't know. I do know that those boys I played board games with are still my best friends today, 25 years later. I created a book series with one of them. The other one is my daughter's godfather. 9th grade. The year I spent without friends might have been the most important year of my life. Whether I became cool or not, I did learn how to be independent and impervious. When I was 25 years old, I decided to quit my first job to try to write a novel. It was not easy. I needed the strength to abandon my colleagues. I needed the strength to ignore everyone who doubted that I could become a published author. I needed the strength to be alone every day, working on a book that no one had read or would read for a year. Once someone finally did read it, I needed the strength to hear their criticism. I'd recommend starting again from scratch and not crumble, to keep going. To be an author, you must be independent and impervious, or close to it. I don't thank the cool kids for being mean to me. They don't get credit for what happened. I thank my 9th grade self for finding the strength somehow to be alone and find what I genuinely liked and allow some true friends to find me. I don't know how a 14-year-old decided to do that, except that I was reacting to an enormous amount of pain. My response to that pain made me who I am. And I don't care what you say. Now, I think I'm actually pretty cool. Adam Gidwitz spent most of his childhood playing with action figures and imagining that he was the greatest basketball player ever. Now he writes books like the scary fairy tale, A Tale Dark and Grim, the Unicorn Rescue Society series, and the only Newbery Honor winner ever to feature a dragon with deadly farts, The Inquisitor's Tale. A Tale Dark and Grim is now an animated series on Netflix. As I said, Adam Gidwitz will visit Suffern Middle School on Friday, February 2nd at 9:45 a.m. If you are interested in more books by Adam Gidwitz, then please check out your classroom library, the school library, or the Adam Gidwitz website, www.adamgidwitz.com/books for more information.